Hey everyone, my name is Becca and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, I'm so glad that you stopped by, and if you've been with us before, welcome back. We focus on all things middle grade literature here, specifically the first chapters of your favorite middle grade novels. Today we are going to be reading the first chapter of Bridge to Bat City by Ernest, Cline. We're going to start by reading the front and side cover to give us an idea of what this novel will be about. The wildness and weirdness all began when a 13-year-old girl moved in right next door to the big, old, beautiful cave, and she and the bats became neighbors. After losing her mother, Opal moves in with her uncle on the family farm, where she forms an unexpected friendship with a music-loving colony of bats. But just as the farm is starting to feel like home, the bats' cave is destroyed by a big mining company that has its sights set on the family land as well. Determined to find a new place where they can fit in, Opal and the bats go to Austin, Texas, home to their favorite singers and bands and a host of wonderfully eccentric characters. But with people afraid of the bats and determined to get rid of them, it'll take a whole lot of courage to prove that this is where the bats and Opal belong. All right, chapter 1, the big, old, beautiful cave. Once upon a time, down here in Texas, in a part of the Lone Star State known as the Hill Country, children at the edge of a rolling green forest, there was this big, old, beautiful cave. And this big, old, beautiful cave happened to be home to a big, old, beautiful mess of bats. Over 1 million of them. These furry little flying critters had called the big old beautiful cave their home for a long, long time. Since way back before the land around there was named Texas or Mexico. Since back before there were any people around to give the land any sort of name at all. Now, according to our encyclopedia, the scientific way to refer to a cave full of furry little flying critters would have been to call them a colony of Mexican free-tailed bats. But I thought it was a little heartless to refer to them as a colony when it was plain to see that what they really were was a family. One big old beautiful bat family made up of thousands and thousands of smaller bat families. All kinds of families made up of all kinds of bats, all living together in peace and harmony in their big old beautiful cave way out there in Hill Country. When I first learned about the bats and how they lived, I remember feeling a mite envious, because they could do several things I'd always dreamed of being able to do, like fly and stay up all night every night until the sun came up, and then snore the daytime away. Because they slept during the day, to them the evening was like our morning, and every morning at sunset, the bats would fly out of their big old beautiful cave to hunt for food. They would stay out most of the night, flying for miles in all directions while gobbling up mountains of moths and mosquitoes and flies and such. These bats were all natural-born bug hunters, and each one of them would eat its own weight in the pesky things every night, night after night. To them, all those bugs tasted better than barbecue. I know most folks are probably revolted by the idea of eating insects, but most folks think hot dogs are delicious, including yours truly, so it's probably best we don't judge. Never yuck anyone else's yum, as my mama used to say. When they weren't soaring through the night sky, the bats preferred to hang upside down by their feet. That's why they lived on the ceiling of their big old beautiful cave, in their own little upside down bat city nestled into the rock. Living upside down was normal for bats. From their perspective, they probably figured all of us humans were the ones who were living upside down. Now, contrary to what you may have heard, bats are not blind. They can see just fine, but they can hear even better. Every bat is born with a pair of superpowered ears that it can swivel in any direction, and bats use their ears in conjunction with their voice to create a kind of natural sonar array, which they use to help them avoid obstacles, zero in on prey, and escape predators. There were always plenty of mean old hawks and dumb old owls flying around that were hunting the bats for food. Whenever they were out hunting bugs for food. Luckily, bats are the fastest mammals in the world, so they usually outrun the mean hawks and owls and other birds of prey. Usually, but not always. Hunting and being hunted. It was their way of life. Each morning at sunrise, after the bats had finished gorging themselves at the big all-you-can-eat hill country bug buffet, they would fly back home to the big old beautiful cave to feed their pups and tuck all of them in for the day. That evening, when the sun went back down, the bats would wake up and repeat the exact same routine all over again. Day after day, night after night, season after season, until the temperatures began to drop. Bats are warm-blooded animals, just like you and me, and since there were over 1 million of them living in the big old beautiful cave, their collective body heat could keep the whole place nice and toasty warm. But once winter arrived, it would get too cold outside at night for the bats to hunt, unless they wanted to run the risk of freezing solid mid-flight. And the colder it got, the fewer insects there were around for them to eat, and they would quickly start to run out of food. When that happened, the whole colony would just pack up and fly south for the winter, migrating just like a lot of birds tend to do. They usually took their winter vacation down in South Texas, or sometimes all the way across the border in Old Mexico, where the weather was much warmer and where they could still find plenty of bugs to eat, all winter long. But the bats didn't have a permanent home down there, so they had to sleep in a different tree every night, or in some old abandoned barn or other building when they were lucky enough to find one. I figure they didn't mind roughing it down south for a few months a year because they always knew it was temporary. It was probably like going to camp for them. And as soon as winter was over and the nights started to warm back up, the bats would all boogie back to Texas, hightailing it north all the way back to their little homes in hill country. When they all finally made it back to the big old beautiful cave, they would pick up right where they left off and go right back to sleeping all day and bug hunting all night. The bats followed the same routine year after year, century after century, for countless generations. Until one summer, when a series of wild and weird events began to unfold that would change their lives and mine forever. I know there may be a few folks out there who doubt the veracity of this tale, but it did happen. My mama didn't raise no liars. Yes, I admit I've told a tall tale or two, and I have been known to embellish a bit from time to time. But I was raised to believe that a good story is worthy of a little embellishment. And this here yarn I'm fixing to spin is my absolute favorite by a considerably wide margin. If I conflate a date or fudge a few facts, it ain't intentional. It's because all this stuff happened 30 or 40 years ago, and old memories can fade just like old photographs. They can also get scratched up and worn out if you handle them too much. And if you don't keep them somewhere safe, you might lose them altogether. That's why I hope you'll hold on to this one for me. Go ahead and pull up a chair, kick off your boots, and put up your feet. I'll tell all y'all exactly what occurred to the best of my recollection. The wildness and weirdness all began when a 13-year-old girl moved in right next door to the big old beautiful cave, and she and the bats became neighbors. That is the end of the first chapter of Bridge to Bat City. If you enjoyed this first chapter, Friday Read Aloud, please consider liking and subscribing so you can be notified every time we have another read aloud available for you. Until next time, everyone, happy reading.